question for me for a long time in my life centered around today's gospel. I remember, in fact, because the question for me has always been, what's going on with the temptation of Christ? It seems kind of strange, or it did seem strange to me, that the devil would try to tempt God to do something, that he would try to tempt the Son of God to do something. It's kind of like, if you're God, would you really be tempted by the devil? Like, okay, here's the devil, all right, he's going to tempt me. Like there was any sort of challenge there. And that question was one that I really searched for a long time and was wondering and looking for an answer to. And I remember, in fact, when I first decided to tell someone about the decision to become a priest, I went and talked to Father Tom Schließman, who was a priest that I've known for a long time, and it was almost more that I wanted to tell him about my decision, but I also wanted to ask him what's going on in that temptation of Christ story. And of course, he had some good things to think about, but I really found some really helpful answers as well from Pope Benedict. He wrote a ton before becoming Pope, but he actually wrote several books as Pope after he was elected Pope. And he wrote a trilogy on Jesus. And the first of those was called Jesus of Nazareth, published several years ago. He since then published one, I think it was last year, on the events of Jesus surrounding Lent and Holy Week, and then recently just released the third volume, which was on the birth events surrounding Christ. But anyways, Pope Benedict, in the early chapter, one of the first chapters of this book that he wrote about Jesus, is a long chapter devoted to the temptation of Christ that we hear in today's gospel. And he answers the question, I think I had, and I think many other people have, of like, was Jesus really tempted? I mean, was he really tempted by the devil? And he has one of the things that helped me, that he wrote, that kind of helped me see how it might be that Jesus was tempted, is that Pope Benedict says in here, in his Jesus of Nazareth book, he says that a very important thing about temptation. He says, temptation does not invite us directly to do evil. That would be far too blatant. Temptation does not invite us directly to do evil. That would be far too blatant. And in fact, I was looking online this morning, and he reiterated this point in his address that he just delivered this morning. Pope Benedict was talking about this again. The idea that temptation does not invite us directly to do evil, it would be far too blatant. What he means by that is, for most of us who are God-fearing, church-going people, and for the most part trying to do God's will, the devil is not going to come along and be like, hey, I want you to wear black robes and draw pentagrams in the dirt and have seances and worship the devil. That's not typically the way the devil works. Now, if someone is so far gone that they would actually give in to such temptation, then the devil's like, fine, that's great. Go ahead. Go into the sewer and have your black masses or whatever. But for most people, the temptation is not, hey, I want you to be evil. The temptation is, in fact, as Pope Benedict goes on, he says what temptation does is it pretends to show us a slightly better way, where we throw ourselves into first place and into trying to make the world a better place in our own way. That is amazingly powerful. That is the nature of temptation. And he's saying that that's precisely the temptation that Jesus felt. Not to not be God, but to just simply do it in a slightly different way. To do it the way that the devil is suggesting, and not to do it the way that God is suggesting. He says, Pope Benedict goes on and says, at the heart of all temptation is the act of pushing God aside because we perceive him as secondary. Sort of keeping God at arm's length, pushing him aside and putting ourselves in the first place and saying, as if we sort of see God as one of many members of a panel offering us suggestions for how we ought to proceed in our life. Okay, it's like we go down the line. Okay, God, here's your opportunity. Why don't you tell me what you think I should do? Okay, thank you. You can be seated now. And now I'm going to move on to someone else who I respect and value their opinion. What do you think I should do here? Okay, thank you. It's like we keep him at arm's length and we listen to him perhaps, but then also at other times we put our own self in first place because we think that at the end of the day we know the best way to get things done. So the devil is not suggesting to Christ, hey, worship the devil. He's saying, I want this. The devil is telling Christ, I want the same thing you want. I just have a slightly better way to get that done. We all want the same thing here. We all want you to be the Son of God and to be worshipped and so on and so forth. But I have other things and other ways to do that I think that you'll like. And I think will be slightly more effective. So he says, don't be a carpenter. That's okay to be a carpenter, but make yourself king. Make yourself king, because if you're the king, then everybody's going to come to you and going to want to listen to you. But not a lot of people are going to listen to a carpenter who's wearing sackcloth and cheap sandals. Become a king. Go up here, go skydiving off the side of the temple, and then let everyone see you hover above the ground and the angels catch you. That will draw people to you and will convince more people that you're God, which is what we all want here. We're all on the same team. We all want the same thing. I just have a slightly different way of going about it. Feed everyone. Turn these rocks into bread. If everyone's fed, everyone will be like, he's the Messiah. Do it my way. God's way of kind of being like in the shadows here and having you just kind of walk around and preach and work some miracles but not really fix everything. Of being obscure. God's plan needs tweaking. And you know how to tweak it. You know what really needs to be done here. And I'm just helping you get there. That is the same temptation that Christ faced, is the same temptation that we face. I'm not asking you to get rid of God. I'm just telling you to do it in a slightly different way, a slightly better way. That is the temptation that Christ faces, and that is the temptation that we face. Pope Benedict says that we can sometimes perceive God to be annoying, secondary, especially when we compare him to all the apparently far more urgent matters that fill our lives. God is asking us to place him first and to take our instructions from him, to take our keys from him, to spend time asking him how we ought to live and what we ought to do with our lives. But we face the temptation to not do that and to instead look for ways to do it our own way. And I think an example of this is one that came to my mind as I was kind of reading over the Holy Father's reflection on this. And spend time, and for example, we take something that we are focusing on this Lent, which is prayer. Well, if I'm in here in prayer or in the church or wherever I'm at, if we're spending time in prayer, typically what happens is, if you're like me, you start to think about other things. You start to think about things that need to be done. And prayer, the temptation is to see prayer as kind of a waste of time. I've got all these other things I need to be doing. And if somebody walked in from the outside and saw me or you or anyone else in here praying, and they would be like, why is he praying or why is she praying? Doesn't she know about all the things that need to be done and all the people that are starving and all the things that need to be fixed and all the programs that need to get going and all of the bills to be paid and all of the people who are, et cetera, et cetera? Doesn't this person know that? Why are they wasting their time in here? I know for myself, if I'm in here, and I'm looking and spending time in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, maybe trying to focus on the tabernacle, and my mind will start to wander about things that I need to be doing. Well, it's okay if I answer a few emails now on my smartphone. That's what God wants. God wants me to, is that evil? To do the work of God? Well, no, that's okay. So I'll not necessarily spend this time in prayer, but just prayer email. My mind starts to think about other things that I need to be doing. People I need to call, things that need to get done, things that I was supposed to do yesterday. Sometimes I'm actually looking at the altar and I think about, the wall over here. And my head will actually start to turn, and I'll start looking at the wall instead of the tabernacle, and I'll start to think about, okay, who are we calling next? Or whatever it might be. All of the things, and my life is no busier or no more hectic than anyone else's, or parents or grandparents or people that are working. The devil's temptation is not, hey, worship the devil. It's just, don't spend so much time thinking about God. That's kind of a waste of time. I've got a way to get the things done that you want to do. You just need to get started on them. Don't waste so much time in prayer. Just be efficient. Do it. I got some suggestions here. Ways to do this better. Fasting is the same way. People would look at fasting and say, what are you fasting for? Don't you know that deprives you of energy? And why would you deprive yourselves of energy and be inefficient when there's so many things to do, so many people to visit, so many nursing homes and hospitals and sick and elderly and homeless and hungry and churches to take care of and people to meet and people to call, emails to send? Why are you fasting? It's a waste of time. Be more efficient. Do it my way. Take God's vision and just tweak it and get there a little bit differently. Don't waste your time. Do it my way. I got a way to help you here. That's what the devil says to Christ, and that's the temptation that he offers to us. And what we have to decide is whose plan are we going to utilize. And we have to realize that the temptation and the whispers that he suggests to us are really evil. They're getting us to place our wisdom in place of God's. They're getting us to place our vision in the place of God's vision. And I know that Pope Benedict goes on and says, the ultimate way that we know this is the case, and I've done this many times and maybe you have as well. Pope Benedict says, ultimately we realize this because when we try to do things our way, whether that's create a program through our own energy and not make it first and foremost from God, if we try to do some endeavor or some effort but without prayer, and without consulting God and just doing it through our own will and force, Pope Benedict says they ultimately fail miserably and they crash and burn. Whatever it might be, whether it's a program at church or if it's something at home or something at work or whatever it might be in our own personal lives, if we do it through our own energy and we do it the devil's way, it never works. But if it's God's idea, if it's something that comes to us in prayer and we make it about God and it's His energy that we do it for, things flower tremendously and prosper. God's way and the devil's way on the surface seem pretty similar, but there's a gigantic difference between doing it my way and treating God as secondary versus placing God first. Wasting time with Him in prayer, wasting time in being inefficient through things like fasting and almsgiving, wasting time with Him and putting Him first and instead saying, here I am, Lord, and come to do your will, and I wait to hear your instructions. Christ was tempted in the desert, and I now realize that, in the same way that we are tempted as well. He was tempted to do it the devil's way and not God's. And we are asked and tempted by the devil to do it the same way. May we be people who instead put God first, who make spending time with God our priority, who enter more fully into the season of Lent and look for ways where we have driven God to the side so that we may invite Him back to take first place in our lives.